Hello and welcome to TorontoWebsiteDeveloper.com. I am Peter Jaworski, the Toronto website developer specializing in Drupal. And in this video tutorial, we're going to look at custom Drupal development. After the last video tutorial on subscription news, got a couple emails saying that people were interested in additional module development tutorials. So that's what this is going to be. Essentially, we're going to create a module that will allow you to enable a block. And in that block, when you're looking at a node, that block will suggest additional nodes for your users to click on and look at related content. Now I know you can do this with views, but the difference with our module is going to be we're going to specifically request 5 results, 5 related nodes, and it's going to be based upon a taxonomy term. But if there's only 2 nodes that have the same taxonomy term, our module is then going to populate the rest of the list with other nodes that are based upon the same content type. This isn't something that you can do with views or something that I've found you can do with views. So it gives us a good segue into module development. So this is one of 2 module development videos. In this one, we're actually going to create the block, query the database, return a value to the block, and we're going to theme that value. In the second video tutorial, we're going to actually look at seeing how many results we get, randomizing those results, and populating the rest of the array if we don't get enough results with additional nodes based upon the content type. So let's get right into it. Let's head over to our editor, and you'll see that if you watch the subscription news video tutorial, you know that to create a module you only need 2 files at the most basic. You need an info file and a module file. So I've gone ahead and I've created those. The related queue is the actual module name, so that has to be shared across both. And these files are actually located in a folder called related queue, which is located in my site's all modules folder. So the info file, pretty straightforward. This first line is the version ID. This is if you contribute it back to Drupal, you get a version. It's for the CVS and to maintain version control. The name here is related queue. That's the name of our module. Description describes the module. Core refers to the version of Drupal that we're using, so we're using 6.x. And package, this is the package that your module will be listed under. If you went to admin modules list, you'd see it referenced under the other listing. So over to our module file. First thing we're going to do is create a comment. This is the @file comment, and this just provides an overview of what our module does. So this is the main module for related queue, and it's always good to document what you're doing in case you contribute this back to the community. So this module will create a block and return a list of related nodes based on taxonomy terms, right? Perfect. So now we have to hook into Drupal. So the easiest way to figure out how to do this is to go to api.drupal.org, and here you'll actually want to look at the Drupal hooks. So we have to figure out how we are going to hook into Drupal so that we don't have to actually hack core. You'll always hear the mantra, don't hack core. This way, these hooks allow you to kind of open a door into Drupal, insert your module, and then close that door back up. It's sometimes hard to find the hook that you're going to use, so I like to just do a Control F, search for block. I know that I'm creating a block, so I'll find the hook, and here we have, lucky enough, hook block. Sometimes this isn't as easy. If we were looking for node, you can see that we could go to hook node API, hook node access record, grants, info, operations type. Sometimes finding the hook that you're going to use can be difficult and tedious. It just requires you to look around and try to figure some things out. So we're going to be using hook block, and this is the function signature. You'll see that we're looking at Drupal 6. We're going to copy this function signature, and we're going to paste that into our module and modify it. But before we do that, you'll see that we pass in the op to this module when we call it, and under op there's list, configure, save, and view. So we have to figure out, op stands for operation. We have to figure out what operation or when this operation is going to be called and how we're going to hook into that. The easiest way to do that is to use the devel module and use DSM. So let's paste our function here, and let's actually create it related to our module. And you'll know whenever you're calling hook something, hook block, hook whatever, hook is always replaced with your module name. So you'll see instead of hook, I have related queue, and that's how Drupal knows to actually call. It'll look for all functions that have hook replaced something underscore block, and it will call that function. So the other thing that I can do is I actually don't have to pass in the edit. We're not going to use that. So like I said, we're going to go ahead and DSM the op to figure out when it is that we're actually going to get our module called. So if we head back to our site, we're going to go, TWD sandbox, we're going to go to site building blocks list. Because the first thing that we would want to do if we had a block would be to enable that block. So once we get here, you'll see that the DSM is called and we're getting the value list. If we looked at api.drupal.org, that makes sense. One of the ops is list. So we know that this is called whenever the blocks are listed here on this admin page. So that's the first thing that we have to accommodate. So we have to get our block listed so people can enable it. So to do that, first thing we should have done right away is create a block. This is equal to an array. This is what this hook returns. So when you're using hook block, Drupal will look for some kind of return value. So we're going to return the block variable. And as I mentioned, we have to we're going to create a switch statement. And for those unfamiliar with PHP, switch statements are kind of if statement. So it's kind of like if op is a certain value, then do X, Y, and Z. We use switch, and the corresponding is case with that. We use that because it's a lot cleaner than having if this, if this, if this. You can specifically define if the case is this, go ahead and do some code. So with that, we're using our block array, and we're going to tell Drupal that block, the first key is 0, right? So Z 0, and the info for that is going to be T, and I'll explain what info is in a second, but related articles. And this is actually the title that will get passed back, that will get listed in Drupal. And we know that we're using info because if you read here, if op is list, the one thing that you have to pass back is info. This is required, and it's the human readable name of the block. So that's what we're doing here. So we can go ahead, we can save this now. We're going to add in the break. Save this now. We've created the block, we've added some info to the block, and we've returned the block. So now we will have our block listed and we can enable it. So you'll see here we have related articles. We want to put that in the right sidebar. And actually we took out our DSM. We want to add that back in because we have to figure out, it's great that we can list this, but what's the op that's called when we want when we want to call this block, when we want to call this hook on a node page. So let's go ahead and we'll add the DSM op back in and figure out what is called. And if this is pretty obvious to you, I apologize, but it wasn't for me when I started out. So always use the basics, right? So we see that the op that's called is view. So we know now that we originally modified our block for when list was the op. Now we're going to do it for view. So if we head back to our module, we know that our second case now has to be view, and we're going to do some code. The code that we're going to first run is going to be DSM arg1. And the reason why we're doing this is because this is how you figure out, in order for us to run a database query, we have to know what we're actually going to be querying. We have to know what node that we're on. And the way that we do that is by taking the argument out of the path. And Drupal has this cool function which will look at your actual path and it'll pull out parts of that path. It'll be a lot clearer once I actually give you the example here, but I've just got to save this. And let's reload. This won't work on the home page. But if we go to our test page here, you'll see our path is test pages / this is the test address. But what Drupal will do with arg is it'll take the internal path. So the internal path is actually node / the node ID. So it's returning us with 37. So this is a great feature because now we know that the node ID that we're looking at is 37, and then we can pull all the node information in from that node ID, specifically what taxonomy terms are associated with that. The thing to note too is if I go to an internal admin page, so I go to site building blocks list, you'll see that the value that gets returned actually isn't a number, it's the word build, because we have admin build block list. The argument 1 is build, so if we ask for argument 0, we'd get admin, 2 would be block, 3 would be list. This is important to note because we don't want our database query to actually run if we don't get a numeric value back. Any node that we create is going to be node / the NID. but if it's an admin page, it won't. And we don't want related nodes for an admin page because they don't exist. So with that in mind, we're going to head back here into our module, and we're going to go to create a variable. And this variable is going to be the NID. It's going to be equal to arg1. So now we have the node ID. So with the node ID, remember we said we want to make sure that any node ID that gets returned back from this argument is a number. And if it's not, we don't want our database query to be run. So the way that we accomplish that is to create an if statement. And this is a PHP function, is numeric, and it will just return a true or false based upon whether or not the value that the variable that you pass to it is a node, is a number or isn't. If it is, it'll pass true. If it's not, it'll pass false. And we only want this to run if it's true. So that's why we're doing that. And now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new variable, content, and this is going to call a custom, another function that we're going to write, which will actually handle the querying of the database. And we're going to pass it the NID, right? Because we got to pass it the node. Theoretically here, you could write in the whole database query within this, this case view. The reason why we're not, and that I would recommend that you don't, is because if you want to use that again, so if we wanted to provide users the option to create a block or add the related nodes to the actual node content variable, we wouldn't be able to do that if we wouldn't be able to call that function. We'd have to rewrite our actual database query for that separate function that would alter the node. By doing a separate function like this and actually calling it, we can have, we can come up with all kinds of different options, and each one of those options will call the database query. It saves you a lot of coding, and it makes your module a lot slimmer. So hopefully I didn't confuse you. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about here. So related get nodes, and it's going to take the NID that we're passing. It has to get it, right? Sorry, that should be related Q. Right, so this is going to actually do our database querying, right? So you can see how we could call this in any number of different functions if we wanted to. First thing that we're going to do in this is we're going to actually load the node, and you do that again through a pretty handy function in Drupal, node load. And with that, let's go ahead and let's DSM the node and see what kind of values we're getting back. So let's save that and head back to our Drupal site. So let's go to, we're going to go to our home page. And actually, we're going to probably have, nope, we should be okay because we did enable our block. One thing that I should have mentioned before is if you're DSMing and you're trying to figure out what op you're using and you're doing this for blocks, if you don't enable your block, you won't see view the way that we saw view, because Drupal won't actually call your block because it's not enabled. So if you ever DSM the op and you're trying to figure out what it is, if your module's not enabled or not being called, you'll never see that there. I should have showed you when we had the chance, but that said. Here's the node that we used DSM on. So you'll see that we have node 37. So we're actually getting the full node object now that we have the node ID. The reason why that's key is because you'll see here we have the taxonomy term part of the array, and we can see here the actual taxonomy terms that are associated with this node. The reason why that's important is because then we can query the database based upon those to see what other nodes are related to it. So we know that we have to dive into taxonomy, node taxonomy, and we will do that by going back to our module and starting our query. So our query is actually going to be, that's right, just got some notes here. So for each node, remember we said we're looking at the taxonomy, as term equal to TID. So what this actually means is for each taxonomy term that we have, so each one of those arrays within an array, we had 4 and 7 if you look back. Remember, we had 2 of these. So for each one of these, we're going to run some code. That's what we're telling Drupal right here. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a variable. This is the SQL. This is actually going to be our query. And the reason why we're doing it as a standalone is just it makes it a lot cleaner for us to write our code here. So we're going to select something from the database, from a table, and it's going to be where something is true or false. So with that, we're going to take a look at phpMyAdmin and check out the tables in our database and figure out what it is we're actually going to be querying. So we'll go right into databases here. And again, knowing what table you're going to look at is sometimes just like searching for a needle in a haystack. Intuitively, we know that we're looking at taxonomy terms, so we want to go down to the term tables. So when we're down here, you'll see that there's a bunch of them. So I mean, first one we could go into would be term data and see what we're looking at here. And you'll see that we have a taxonomy term and a vocabulary ID. This doesn't really help us because we don't get any node ID out of it. So let's take a look at another table. Let's take a look at term node. So in term node, we see we get an NID, version ID for the node if we were using versions, and we also get a term ID. So this seems exactly what we need, right? We need the node ID, we need to know what terms are associated with it, and from here we can see what nodes share taxonomy term 7, right? So it looks like there are 2 of them here. So that's a benefit. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So let's head back to our code, and we're going to select the NID, right? Because we saw NID is what we want. That's the name of the column. So NID from squiggly brackets. We want this from term underscore node. That's the table that we're looking at. And we use squiggly brackets just so that names of tables can be swapped out if there was ever a need to be. And we're going to do this where, and again, this might look a little bit foreign to you, but don't worry, I'll explain in a sec. And not equal to, oops, NID not equal to %D. What this does here is we're saying where taxonomy term is equal to some value and the node ID is not equal to some value. The reason why we don't actually write in our variables here, like we could put in the taxonomy term, is you become susceptible to SQL injections. So Drupal has, because we're going to be using our Drupal functions to query our database, they have built-in security features so that it'll sanitize whatever data is being passed into the query. So if we were passing in a string, this would be %s. And the node ID here, we're saying the node ID is not equal to some number, and that's going to be the actual node that we're looking at right now, because we don't want our query to turn around and say, yeah, a related node is the node that you're looking at. It just doesn't make sense, so we're going to avoid that right away by saying, don't pass us back a node ID where it's the same as what we're looking at. So in order to do this, let's go ahead and we're going to create our result. It's going to be equal to db query, and I spelled query wrong. And we're going to pass in to db query our $SQL. That's our query that we've just written. And you'll see what you'll do after that is you always write your query, comma, and then whatever values you have to pass in. So the first value that we have to pass in is actually $TID, and then we have to pass in node NID. And the reason why we're doing TID is because for each one of these taxonomies, remember they were a keyed array, so it's actually giving us 4. We have to go into 4 and get TID, right? So, I mean, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but that's what we're doing. So let's go ahead and let's DSM the result to see what we get. And just before we do that, we see we get an error because we forgot our semicolon. So we'll save that. And actually, just before we do that, we're also going to show you, here's a cool little thing. So db query, you put in a D at the end of it, and for debug, and we can see what the query is that gets passed into Drupal, just to make sure that our query is operating properly. So now you'll see, so first thing is we get our query that's run here. So we're selecting NID from the term node, you notice squiggly brackets are gone, where taxonomy term is equal to 4 and node ID is not equal to 37 because we're on node 37. Same thing, we have another taxonomy term, so it gets called again. So we actually get 2 results back because we ran 2 queries, but you'll see they're returned as objects. We can't actually do anything with them. So again, this is a little bit tricky, but what we have to do is we'll take out our DSM, and while we're still in the for each loop, we're going to go while row, and I'll explain this in a sec, db fetch, we use fetch object, result. So what this does is, this is essentially saying, it's going to loop through our result variable, our result variable, and it's going to fetch each one of the SQL objects. So each one of the rows that we're getting returned back, and it's going to pass in, and it's going to give that value to row. So every time, so as long as row is getting a value out of this loop will continue occurring. So, I mean, theoretically, we could have 10 taxonomy terms. We wouldn't know how many we have. This would just keep running until it got to the very last one. And then row wasn't given a result back. So, what we have to do is, we're going to create a list of nodes, of node IDs, to manipulate. And let's go ahead and we'll DSM this. Should be nodes. We're going to put an S on there. And just before we do that, it's always good to initialize your arrays first, or at least I prefer to. Save that, and we're going to put in a comma. Go back to our page. We're going to reload it. You notice I like to debug a lot while I'm working, just to make sure that things aren't getting screwed up. So this is confusing. We still had our two DSMs from before. Those are what these are. So this is our new one. You'll see that we're getting node ID 35, 36, and 36. So this is a bit of a problem because we're getting the same node ID passed in twice because there's a taxonomy term that is shared. So that becomes a problem because we don't want, again, multiple values returned back to our user because it's redundant. Easily rectified by, again, a nice PHP function called inArray. And what inArray does is it will take in a specific value that you're looking for. So we're looking for the NID, and you can pass in an array, and it will tell you if the node ID is actually a value of that array. So not a key, but an actual value. So we're going to take this out here. Got to make sure our spaces are nice and lined up. So if the node ID is already in the arrays node, then we're not going to do anything. If it isn't in there, we're going to add it to the arrays node. So let's go ahead and save that, and we'll get out of here. We'll DSM nodes. Actually, sorry, I want to take that out of our loop. And we can go ahead and we can save that. We'll go back to our site, reload, and sure enough we get an error, so let's go check out what's going on at line 46. Oh, and clearly we've put in the wrong squiggly bracket there, so gotta change that. Hit refresh. That's why it's always a good idea to check out what you're doing. So you'll see now we've reduced it to 35 and 36. It doesn't add the same node twice. Go back into our module, take out query D so we stop seeing those up at the top. And now what we have to do is return some values back to our block. So to do that, we are going to go into a for each statement. And we're going to go nodes as NID. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to go through each one of our node IDs that we're getting here, and we want to pass those back. We want to pass some values back to the block. And again, because we don't know how many nodes that we're going to have listed, a for each will actually go through every single one of them until it hits the end. And we want it as NID because that's what we actually have as each value in the array. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called related node, and this is going to, we're going to use node load again, and this is going to load all the information for a particular node based upon the node ID that we're looking at. So for each node that we go through, it's going to load all the information for it. So from there, what we're going to want to do is, I'll explain this in 1 second. So slash, and we're going to pass NID. So when we pass the values back, we're going to want to list all of our related content on the right, but we want to provide users a way to get there. So we have to actually create links. So in order to create links, we're going to take the node ID, we're going to figure out what the path is, we're going to create the title, and we're going to make that a link, and users can then click on that and go back over to a different node. But in order to do that, we have to do some, it's not complicated, but you know, some minor finer tuning to figure out what the actual path is and how can we pass that back. So this path variable that was created is going to be equal to node/NID. And we know that the internal paths for all of our nodes are going to be node/some number. So that's why we're doing that. The other thing that we're going to do is, because we don't actually want to pass that back to users, we don't want users to hover over that and see, you know, they're looking at a title, oh, it's node/87, when your actual alias is, you know, test pages / you know, how to, you know, create a module type thing. That would be our path alias, right? So we want to provide that alias URL for the actual title if a user hovers over that. And I could have probably just super confused you, but just bear with me. So path, let's go to language, and I'll explain exactly what I'm doing in just 1 second. So I'm calling here path Drupal get path alias. Again, another handy internal Drupal function. And if we go back to api.drupal.org, we can search for Drupal get path alias. You might be wondering how I know about this. When I first discovered it, it was through searching through the forums. The forums are a huge resource. Use those, because chances are someone's always running into the problem that you've run into well before you have, unless you're blazing some kind of new path through Drupal. What this does is, we're using version 6, so it'll take a path, right? And that's an internal Drupal path. It'll take a language to check. Well, we're not using multi-site languages. And it'll return the actual alias that was provided by the administrator. So what alias does that term ID have? So if we head back to our site, or sorry, back to our code, open this up, and we can DSM our path alias. That's right, we're going to debug and figure out what's actually getting passed here. So let's go ahead and we'll click on our taxonomy term node. And we should get 2 variables, right? 2 values, because we know that there are two taxonomy terms that are associated with this. So we're getting the internal path, which is good. So now let's render some output and create a link. So we're going to create a variable. This is output, and this is going to be equal to, and it's an array. So we should actually be going up here too and go output equal to array, just to initialize it. And what we want to output is we actually want to provide the node titles for the related nodes, and we're going to create those as links, and then we're going to also include the body. So in order to, I mean, you could go ahead and you could start trying to create your own links and write in all the classes, the HTML and all that kind of stuff. But if you go over to Drupal.org or api.drupal.org, search for the L function. What this is it'll actually, the L function is an internal Drupal function which will format an internal external URL as HTML anchor tag. So provide your classes and do the full thing for you. It makes things really easy. All you have to do is pass in the text that you want to make the link, and then you pass in the path for that link. So let's go ahead and let's use that. So output is going to be equal to L. First thing we're doing is passing in related node title, right? And we're going to pass in the path alias, which is what it's going to make it. And we also pass in options, but these options we're not actually going to use. And then, so that's going to give us our title as a link, but we also want to add in the node body. So we're going to add in a BR tag here, create a line break, and then we're going to add in related node, need a $sign there, body, right? And we're using related node because up here we loaded the actual node ID. So with that, let's go ahead and that's right, let's debug, see what we get passed back as some output here. So reloading the page, we see we get an array of 2 things, which makes sense because we passed the output as arrays, and you'll see we get an A anchor tag with href, an actual reference to an internal URL, as well as the ending, and then we get our BR and then our node body. So everything looks to be going, working well. So output is coming along properly. Heading back to our module, we can take out the DSM here, and now we have our output. So we actually have to return it. So how we're going to do that is we're going to go return, and we're going to use the theme, the theming layer. And we're actually going to provide an item list back. Right? So what this is saying, it's saying theme our output, theme it as item list, right? Which is internal to Drupal, and use the values from the output variable that we've created here. So we've returned that back to the block, but you'll see we're returning out of the block, we're returning block, but we don't have any actual value being passed into that. So to make that crystal clear, as I'm sure it's clear as mud, we're going to DSM the block content so you can see what I'm talking about. And again, just to make sure that the values are passed back properly through the theme function. So you'll see here, we pass it through the theme function, we get all this kind of crazy stuff, a bunch of classes automatically added to it, UL, lists, class first, class last, good stuff, all good stuff. Go back to our module, we can take this out now, and what we're going to do is, we're going to go block is content is equal to block underscore content. And the reason why we know to use this content key is if we go to devel, and we're going to look at any block here, go into it. The block is what we're actually manipulating here. So for our case, or for this case, you'll see underscore content. This part, this is a string, right? It's actually all of your HTML. So that's what we're passing back. We saw that we got HTML from our query, or from our other function, and now we're going to pass that in as the content for the block. So let's keep our fingers crossed, but once we reload this page, we should get our actual block with content here. And look at that. We have our title as a link, and you'll see down at the bottom we have it actually going to an internal source. Both nodes are being passed back, and we get the body. The only thing that we don't have is the title for our block. So let's go ahead and let's rectify that, and that'll be the end of this Drupal video tutorial. So to do that, go into block, subject, equal to related articles, right? And that's easily, you can easily check that out by going into a themer, looking at this block, and we're going to go down to subject. See, subject is Yaworsk. That's what the subject is here. So we're just going to copy that, and we're going to add our own subject in. So just to make sure that I saved it. Nope, I didn't. So we're going to hit save. Reload here. There you go, we have related articles. So that's the end of this video tutorial. I should mention here, we're actually passing back this content right back in to our block, but we're hard coding it, right? So our line here, we're actually putting in the BR tag and related body. It's all hard coded. You might have somebody who wants to change this, so if you're contributing it back, you would typically pass this through the theme layer to allow them to override it. We're not doing that because, to be honest, it's beyond the scope of this this video tutorial. But if you're curious about it, I can include it in the next video tutorial. If you just leave a comment or shoot me an email, let me know if you'd be interested in it. But that's essentially it. That's the end of this video tutorial. So in the next video tutorial, again, 2 of 2, we'll actually look at creating, filling that block that we have with an additional three returned results based upon the content type that we're looking at, and hopefully I should have that up in about a week. But please leave me a comment, shoot me an email if you want to. I've got a couple of those. I really appreciate them. Let me know if these video tutorials are helping you. I like creating them. Actually, this one probably took me combined 8 hours or so because everything, it seemed like any error I could get, I kept getting it. I actually recorded the first video tutorial, first version, with a pair of pants in the back, some laundry. Thought that wasn't appropriate. So again, I like doing it. Let me know if they're helping you, and hopefully you're learning something. Take care.